Hello centaur artists, I've missed you so much. If you're not a centaur, you're welcome as well. Art is for all. Today we're going to be doing printmaking and we're going to be developing craft. This studio habit is all about learning new techniques, new ways to grow as an artist so that you can use materials and tools that you haven't used before or methods that you haven't tried before. Some of you may have done something similar to this in class, but there's a little bit of a spin on it, so I'm going to show you. The tools and materials that we need today are these. So for materials, you need one kind of waxy cardboard. That would be like a box for a microwave dinner or a cereal box or any other waxy cardboard that you find. It's the kind that has a bit of shine on it. It probably has something printed on it, an image most likely if it's a waxy cardboard. Then we need regular cardboard. That's the kind that you'd find on an Amazon box. It's just brown, it's not shiny, it doesn't feel as smooth. You need some kind of glue. It can be hot glue, but it can also be tacky glue. I would advise against using a glue stick for this, but if that's all you have, you could probably make it work. For our ink, there are so many different materials you could use. I'm not going to name them all because we'd be here all day, but I'm going to be using markers. You could also use watercolor paints, watercolor pastels, watercolor pencils, or traditional paint. You're probably not going to want to use a normal ink pad though, because I haven't found that worked very well. And last, for tools, we have two things. We have scissors. I would like to use both a big and a small, but if you only have one, you could definitely get away with using just one. And I'm going to be using a Q-tip because I'm using tacky glue, but you don't need a Q-tip, it's not vital. All right, let's get started. So first, I'm going to pour out my tacky glue in a puddle. You can use the tacky glue straight from the bottle with a little bit of the top cut off, but I find I often have better control if I just pour myself a puddle and then use a Q-tip. Next, you're going to get to cutting 2 squares of your normal cardboard. This is where I like to use the large scissors, but you could use a small scissors if you would like. Cut bigger than you think you need because ultimately you can always make your stamp smaller, but you can't make it bigger. So give yourself a nice base. One of these is going to be used as the actual stamp and the other will be the base of the stamp. So once you have a square for the base of the stamp, that's pretty much it. This piece is done. For the other piece, if you want, you can use a pen to draw out the image you want for your stamp. I'm going to just be freehanding it, but you absolutely can draw your image first. You're going to take your waxy cardboard and you're also going to want a square that you can work with. It doesn't need to be perfect. We're going to be cutting this into an image and putting it on top of the normal cardboard. If you drew what you wanted to do, you would probably want it to be this top one, the waxy cardboard that you drew on. If it's really hard to cut through both layers, you can cut out one and then use the other and trace it to cut the second layer, but I like to just cut them at once. I'm going to make my star a little funky because that's how I like it. I don't like things to be overly precise. I want it to have a little bit of movement to it. If they don't line up perfectly, that's okay. You can always do a little trimming later, and if the waxy part is a little bigger than the normal cardboard, that's fine. If it goes over the edge of it, that's fine. I'm going to take my tacky glue. You don't need a ton of tacky glue. This is the other reason that I love to use the Q-tip system. It helps with that control. Just do a bit. It is nice to get those edges though, because that's a place where it's more likely to come up later. So get a little at your end. You can make a bigger stamp with a larger image, but it's actually really nice to not get too complicated because if you make a couple of stamps, then you can play around with them more rather than trying to make one big stamp with a whole image on it. So for instance, I'm going to use this to do shooting stars, but I'm not putting the shooting star aspect on one stamp. I'm leaving the trail of the star on another stamp because it gives me more to play around with. Line that up and press it down. Remember, glue doesn't work unless you press. If you see one part's coming up a bit, you can go back and just add a touch more. Tacky glue takes about 24 hours to dry, so you can't immediately play with this stamp, but it can be fun to make a couple of them, let them dry. You could risk it if you want, but I would advise to just let it dry. Then I'm going to do this. It's always best to put your glue on the small object, not the large, because then you can tell where the glue would go. It's tempting to want to put it here, but then I won't know how to line it up. So it's nicer if you can put it on the smaller object. Press that down, and now you have finished your stamp. You'll let it dry for 24 hours. Now I'm going to show you a stamp that I have previously made. Actually, two stamps that I previously made. So these can be used together to make a shooting star, but I could also play around with this and make it other things like the top of a flower. That's why it's really fun to separate your stamps instead of trying to make one complicated stamp all together. This is the part that's really fun. So I'm going to take my stamp, I'm going to have some water that I dip my marker in for just a second. If you dip your marker in the water for a long time, you're just going to be losing a lot of ink to it, and that's wasteful. So just a second, dip it in there, and then start drawing on your stamp. If you want, you can do different sections with different colors. So I'm going to make my star be half blue, half purple. You may be asking yourself, why did we bother to have two types of cardboard? And this is where the waxy cardboard comes in. Because if you use normal cardboard and try to use this marker technique, it's going to just soak up the marker. But by using the waxy cardboard, there's a little bit of resistance. It's not completely waterproof, but it's water resistant, and so it's not going to soak up that ink. I prefer to stamp with my stamp on the bottom rather than turning it around and placing the other way. You can do that, but I found I get better results when I place it on the bottom. And then you can see the colors starting to go through. That's a good way to tell where you've pressed. Some prints aren't going to work out, and that's okay. Try another one. Experiment, stretch, and explore. That's what we're here for. Find a beautiful oops. All right, so that one didn't fully show up in some of the areas. So let's maybe enhance it a little. If we want to, you can fill in with the normal marker, or you can keep that because you like it and it's funky, or just do another print. But it's something to play around with. Now I'm going to give it the shooting star part. And you can decide also on a stamp to not ink the whole thing. So if you decided that I only wanted this one section of the shooting star, let's try that. If I don't add ink to it, then it's not going to show up. I recommend going for some pretty dark markers. Also, make sure not to get a lot of tacky glue on the front of your waxy cardboard, because that might overly resist the ink so that it really doesn't stay. I think that I have a little bit of glue in that patch, so that's what's causing the ink to not go in one area. And voila! That's how to print with cardboard. When you're done with the color, you can take a paper towel and wipe off and reuse it. And that's where the waxy cardboard really comes in. That's what really makes this stamp work. Thanks for coming to Creativity Time with Julia Major. Happy making!